ladies and gentlemen, happy holidays to everybody, and happy New Year as well. And speaking of New Year, welcome to another episode of Unsavory Politique with your host Jamar Jabari and Alex Suarez, and we have a new guest. Um, you have seen him on this show before, so it's a great introduction to give. This man, trucker, union guy, long time comrade in the struggle from the Occupy. Dust James, everyone. Good to see you, Dust. Let's get you all the way up here. Actually, that's
Okay.
better. That's way better.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be here. I want to make a slight correction. I do not have the privilege of being in the union, although I have done support work
Oh,
and
I
really
apologize.
supported
Yeah.
unions, including forming a local Jobs with Justice chapter as a student activist. And I've always supported labor, but I live in a rural place in the middle of North Carolina, and
I went there once. I can vouch for that. Very rural. I went and visited Comrade Dust up there once when we went up to D.C., and that is quite a rural area. Yeah, but
we went canoeing together. We went canoeing.
Scenery.
We went canoeing together. It was
That's
great.
Right. We went
right on the Cape
canoeing
Fear,
in the
North
lagoon
Carolina.
out there.
Yeah.
I always thought that,
You know how they say all the
truckers were
comrades
all
are in the
union.
same. All us comrades are in the same boat. It
Yeah.
was quite literal with Dust. Yeah. But I guess I'm the monkey in the middle tonight. So just to let our listeners know, Comrade Jamar is a little under the weather tonight, so he might have to leave to go to the bathroom during the show. He's hosting the StreamYard live right now, but I would take over when he has to go. I haven't written a statement. I've been very busy, but just going to speak from the heart, have a discussion with Comrade Dust, and of course, Comrade should feel free to leave comments in the YouTube. I can't show them because I'm not hosting the show, but while Comrade Jamar is here, you can, or you could DM me. A lot of people that listen to this are on my Twitter. They can DM me a comment or a question, and I can relate it to the show. So,
yeah, definitely I can show the comments. So if you guys have any questions or anything, right now I am sharing it to everywhere so everyone can see it. Go ahead, Alex. Yep.
Yeah, the theme for today's show is resolution revolution, and so we need to look at it at the context of the current regime that's coming into power. We have the representation of the neoliberal facilitators of fascism or imperialism that are exiting the White House, and then the full-on fascists are entering the Trump regime 2.0, and we have to look at the political necessity to formulate a united front of leftists and see how we need to conduct ourselves in this new historical era or context that we're facing into the new year with the ongoing idea of revolution. Us revolutionaries, particular in the context of living in the U.S. empire, whether a working class, poor, oppressed nation, a lot of times we feel like the last of the Jedi. We feel like a dying race. But that's because the corporate media tries to dominate, although much of the younger generations are ignoring this corporate press, bourgeois press. They make it seem that most Americans are with one of the two principal parties. But you have more and more, particularly among the youth, that are independent or independent progressives or the potential to become leftists. And these independents and third parties, people that don't vote, is a huge block. People that we can talk to about revolution, about the history of revolution. Often you see the more orthodox groups are Eurocentric. Dustin and I have encountered these people. They're very Eurocentric. So they focus on what happens in Europe and they base everything off that. And I invented a term on Twitter the other day. I don't think anybody has ever used it. Latin centric. That's me. But also as being Latin centric because Latin America is within the context of the third world. You have to look at Africa. You have to look at Asia, other parts of the third world, which is also called the global South.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, I think not just Latin Americans in the U.S. empire, white Americans, Americans of different backgrounds in the working class oppressed nation can look to the example of Latin America. And as a lot of people know, I was a witness to the electoral process of Venezuela not that long ago, only 3 years ago, November 2021, and saw firsthand how leftists got their act together down there. They were divided for a while too. They were infiltrated for a while too. But why can't we envision a new society and implement that new society? And I touched on that when I accompanied Uhuru to DC for the Black is Black Coalition. Not last year, but the year prior. I couldn't go this time around.
And congratulations on your win.
Assange freed in the middle part of this year. We saw no dime, no time, which is the new slogan of the Uhuru movement and their supporters. They'd have to pay a dime in fines. They'd have to do a single time, and it's in their sentencing of the second lesser charge of conspiring to be foreign agents. It is very similar to the Alex Saab case.
Mm-hmm.
The bourgeois press blatantly lied about him.
Mm-hmm.
He was freed about exactly a year ago, at the end of 2023. They said that he was a money launderer, but the only federal charge they had against him was conspiring to money launder. So this conspiring thing, right? You hear this term conspiracy theorist. Who are the real conspiracy theorists here? It's the government. It's the lies that they perpetuate to try to bring back McCarthyism. You see, I saw a movie today, and I highly recommend it. I brought it up to Dust earlier today. He hasn't been able to see it yet, but it's a movie with Robert De Niro. Scorsese's in it. I didn't check if he directed it, but he plays a part in it. He plays a communist.
Interesting.
Filmmaker Scorsese.
Scorsese plays a communist.
Plays a friend of the communists who's
there's
trying to intimidate
McCarthy. And I have a lot to respond to.
Yeah, of course. That's all I'll say is that there's a movie that I can't think of the name right now, but it came out in the 90s that touched on the history of McCarthyism, and we have a new McCarthyism now, which they're using against Uhuru, calling them Russian agents. And when you know your history, you see its repetition, but much of the society does not know the history or ignores it or has a revisionist history. But go ahead, Dustin.
Yes, I was also at the
Back is Black.
The Black is Back Coalition annual march. That was last year, man. We've been slipping. We should have attended this year. I also, we are going through new McCarthyism with the anti-Russian. You have even Russian artists being kicked out and fired simply for being Russian. It's straight up xenophobic and national discrimination against Russians. And Russian art, a huge portion of human art itself is being repressed.
And athletes too. They're going after Russian athletes.
But no, I disagree with the characterization of Trump being a switch from neoliberal imperialism to full-on fascism. I think Trump personally is a fascist. He uses a lot of fascist appeals. But if he was a full-on fascist in comparison to Joe Biden, I would have voted for Joe Biden. I did not vote for Joe Biden. And we should be uniting with liberal imperialists against them to prevent him. But I don't see it that way. Now, there is a major escalation of rhetoric against immigrant brothers and sisters in particular. The threat of actually the proposed policies of mass deportations. And we know the Democrats have also carried out mass deportations, and they didn't even run on it. Now we have someone coming in the office who did originally run on mass deportation the first time. But if you looked at the rhetoric on the campaign trail this time, it was tenfold. The attacks on immigrants where every other statement kept coming back to it. And if he does a tenth of what he promised to do, it is going to be an attack not only on the undocumented workers, the immigrant community, but the entire working class. And I think we do need to develop defense groups. And I think there was a meeting last Sunday with Party for Socialism and Liberation in Durham that was doing just that. uniting longtime immigrants, activists with the immigrant community, hopefully to build defense organizations. I'd like to see that, but I don't see the demarquee from Biden to Trump as neoliberalism to fascism. I think as neoliberal imperialism escalated. And I think the next person is going to be a further escalation. And maybe we'll see fascism come around, but I don't take the word fascism lightly. The word.
I have to struggle with this as well, too.
If DeSantis got in to the White House,
it would have been fascism.
He's a more effective fascist than Trump. That would be really scary. And he's running Florida here.
He's a lawyer.
You know, we had Rebecca Jones, you know, like we saw what happened with her. She had to flee.
Yeah.
And so she had to flee the state, and she had a lot of allies in the state, but not enough. When it's DeSantis, he wants to go after you. He's like a cross between Mussolini and the mafia, which is ironic because Mussolini was anti-mafia. That's why the mafia worked with the United States to expel the fascists from Sicily and Italy.
Right.
I mean, it's just Sicily part of Italy, but
I
he's like cross between both. Like most DeSantis is
add one more distinction to my position.
Yeah.
That from someone of an oppressor nation looking at the policies towards the workers, they have escalated, but it has not come to the point of fascism. But if you look through the perspective of someone of an oppressed nation, both of the regimes are currently fascist. Mm-hmm. Both of the regimes against Afro-America, against immigrants, against Rasa, against the indigenous, both portions of are fascist.
One's more hypocritical than the other.
From the perspective of the oppressed. I just don't see it I don't see the fascism in Trump towards the oppressor nation, which I'm a member of, which I am a rebellious member of.
I said it in a tweet the other day. I said, right now, immigrant groups need to take up arms. That's really the only way to take care of it. I mean, they need to take up arms. They need to self-organize. It's a huge threat. Of course, the Democrats are doing the same thing, but with Trump, it's going to be because he has a mandate now. Last time he didn't. He had 5 million more people voted for him than Kamala. So now he's going to feel like way more empowered than he did in 2016. He's going to know how to be more effective. Maybe not effective as DeSantis would be, but DeSantis was a military lawyer. Yeah. But something else, I think they're called the Mises Caucus. Am I saying this right? The caucus within LP, the Libertarian Party?
Yes.
Yeah, the Mises Caucus were the most extreme, most racist. And they've dominated the Libertarian Party in the past few years. Of course, Gray Zone's completely enamored with them, infatuated with them, whatever you want to put it. But Mises Caucus, they were so dominant in the Libertarian Party that barely any Libertarians came out to vote this time. Yeah. They all voted for Trump. And Jill Stein, for the first time ever, had more votes than the Libertarian Party did. The Green Party did pretty well, considering, because they were also suppressing them. In North Carolina, the Democrats were suppressing the Greens, but they still got a lot of votes considering.
I have to say, from my perspective, I struggled a lot with not seeing Trump as being a fascist in the beginning. But after literally watching over 10 hours of his interviews that I had to watch while at work and stuff, and just seeing what he has in mind, I definitely on the tail end are saying, okay, he can definitely bring forth a different type of fascism, especially with how the Democrats have failed so much in this election, to the point that it's a triple Republican rule on all three branches.
By the way, Trump is not an idiot. He's brilliant when it comes to things like interpersonal intelligence. I'll give you an example. I saw the entire interview he did with Joe Rogan.
Yeah, that was one of the ones I watched
for 2.5 hours, and you see how Trump is there.
I think I'm not saying
in his favor. I'm saying Trump knows how to manipulate people. This is Joe Rogan, who was an independent for years, who was just interviewing Trump for years, and Trump probably himself studied Rogan and had some of his people study Rogan and find out what's the best way to flatter him and to get himself in. And so, you see Trump respond to Rogan and like mention the comedian thing and like all this stuff. And you know that Trump doesn't mean half of what he's saying, but he's saying it to use Rogan's fans to get the vote, and it worked.
11 million people watch him.
Right.
So,
and so that was very dangerous that he knows how to manipulate that way. But then the thing is, he's easily manipulated. In that sense, he's not very intelligent. Other leaders can manipulate him and flatter him, and he's susceptible to that as well. So
I wanted to add a point about the libertarians. The Mises Caucus is an escalation towards racism. Well, let's look at the Libertarian Party. Let's go back. Ron Paul was the running guy. Ron Paul has given speeches in front of Confederate flags. He's from Texas. And let's talk about cutting government and how that ties into racist Reaganite policies.
Well, the Koch brothers used to finance the Libertarian Party, no?
The whole racist trope about the government is giving to oppress people. Right. Even though welfare recipients are majority white, poor whites.
Well, they actually made it legal for even legal residents of the country to get welfare in the 80s.
Libertarianism and Ron Paul have edited and wrote racist articles, talked and supported racist groups. The Libertarians have long been a racist organization, at the very least knowingly appeals to and gets part of their power base from sentiments of racism. And this Mises Caucus, which supposedly hosted an anti-intervention rally against Russia a few years back, with other unscrupulous organizations.
Well, you have to be very politically immature to think that they're anti-imperialist, right? They're just isolationists.
It is an escalation of an already racist organization.
Good point.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I feel that the libertarians are just the radical Republicans, and I think that the libertarians have shown their face with a Trump. I've never seen a Republican candidate go into a libertarian convention and just literally get told, "This is why you guys lose all the time," and then they still vote for him. Like, that's just it just tells me exactly what I need to know.
The Republicans, unlike the Democrats, got rid of superdelegates.
Yeah.
And I thought it was funny because the Democrats lessened the amount of superdelegates. And they said, "Oh, look how progressive we are." And it's like, well, the Republicans are left of you then, because they've gotten rid of years ago their superdelegates altogether. So it was harder to rig it against Trump like they rigged it against Bernie, being an anti-establishment candidate in the Republican Party.
They didn't even run a primary this year. They didn't even run a primary. They appointed someone.
No.
The Democrats didn't even have a primary, correct? But I'm saying
for historical context, I mean,
they also manipulated it, yeah.
For historical context, we got to remember that the Republican Party is the most successful third party in history.
But it was revolutionary at the time that it was a third party.
It was an anti-slavery party,
yeah. That's how they was able to do what they was able to do to knock out the Whigs. And I feel that they will always probe, because they figure out all the time of the consciousness of working class people, how to exploit. Within the 60s, when it was black, when not black, but when it was Jim Crow, they always pulled at the morals with abortion and all these things. They always found ways to manipulate effectively the working class. When you look into the studies, well, you guys already know. Anyway, I'm just talking to our audience. When I
even Hitler used some of the rhetoric of the socialists, not because he was a socialist, but there's another revisionist claim. The right uses that he wasn't really right wing. Of course, he was right wing. He called himself right wing, but he also used some of the rhetoric of the socialists to convince. Even though most of the people that support him in Germany were middle class, not working class, some working class elements did support Hitler because he used that rhetoric.
Yeah, and Hitler learned it from us. So
he learned Jim Crow from. He learned the racist policies from U.S. Jim Crow. That is correct.
Yeah. So I think what you guys are saying, we have to, as leftists, we have to find a way, as we always continue to do, to combat that, because people felt that they were getting a breath of fresh air from my conversations because of how awful the Democrats left things. And don't get me wrong, the 2-year Hold up. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna go use the bathroom. 2-year economic situation that keeps happening during Trump election. His first term, it was Obama's economy for the 2 years of that, and then when we go into Trump, we see exactly how horrifying it got. In Joe Biden's defense, I have to say the first 2 years of the economy was not his fault because it was Trump's economy, and people are not going to see
Obama was
that.
the last U.S. president to negotiate with Russia. He negotiated with the Russian entry into Syria to defend Assad. I'm not saying Obama was a great president. I'm just saying at least he spoke with the Russians and did some deals with them.
Right.
Of course, after Obama completely cut off contact with the Russians,
Biden has not
Trump was
spoke,
pressured to do that. And with Biden, he didn't have to be pressured. He didn't want to communicate at all with the Russians.
Yeah.
And then what happened? They went into Ukraine because they had no more communication with the West. What else were they were going to do? They were continuing to support groups that were doing genocide against the ethnic Russians in those areas. So.
I don't know. I would say that the imperialist duopoly has governed over a falling economy since 1968, which was the height of working class buying power. It was also the height of the union movement in the United States. I think each president is getting worse, and conditions are getting worse. Inflation, and I don't think it's going to stop. There was a switch in the party. The racists did switch sides, the more racist elements, in the 60s when you had they kicked when basically the Dixiecrats in the South who supported Roosevelt. There was racist in Roosevelt's coalition. They switched sides and they went to the Republicans.
You're talking about the second Roosevelt, right? The FDR.
Yes, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had a major racist component within Dixiecrats, and the racists in the South within the New Deal programs completely excluded Black people from the New Deal programs. And those Dixiecrats were kicked out or they left. They're more like, you know how the Civil War was. They were just not even getting rid of slavery in the North, just to get close to it. In the South, it succeeded. That's what the Dixiecrats did. The Dixiecrats went from the Democrats to the Republicans, and the Republicans have been the more overt racist party since the 1960s.
Well, yeah, Malcolm X talked a lot about that as well. He basically said at least they're going to stab you from the front, not the backs, like the Democrats would. So you'll see the enemy.
I would like to emphasize on this latest election, the Trump victory where Trump won the popular vote. It's still firmly my opinion that the majority of people with specifically workers and oppressed in particular, and the population in general, the majority of the population still votes Democrat if they vote.
Yeah.
What happened in this last election is because of the downturn in the economy, and none of the promises of the Biden campaign were fulfilled in the slightest. That there was a huge downturn and voter turnout.
You got a second camera.
And that's the only reason why Trump won the election. It does not. I do not think that. Yes, he appealed to a segment of the population. Maybe a growing segment of the population. But I think the main reason why he won, the racists came out in full force. The people who liked Trump came out in higher numbers, and the majority of people and the people who usually vote Democrat did not vote. And this also explains the supposed increase within oppressed nations voting for Trump. So
that's about the address as well.
There's more percent of the Black.
Collectively transforming community, peace in our human family, volume and unity, divine light shining individually, collectively transforming community, peace in our human family.